Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday morning, January the 20th. A lot to talk about this morning. It looks like we will have a major weekend winter storm that will impact a large part of the nation. It could produce a significant snowstorm in the mid-Atlantic region, a crippling icing event down across the southern states, potentially from Texas all the way to the Carolinas. Bitter cold conditions as we begin the day here today in the Mid-Atlantic region, with some suburbs in the I-95 corridor region down near 10 degrees early this morning, and it looks like single-digit lows are possible in some suburban locations by later tonight, early Wednesday morning. And the bitter cold pattern looks like it'll continue for at least the next couple of weeks across a large portion of the nation. In fact, we'll start off here with a map from last night's European model run at 0Z for actual temperature forecast for midday on Saturday. A few areas I want to highlight here. First of all, up across the northern plains, places like Minnesota and Wisconsin, you're talking about 25 to 30 degrees below zero at midday on Saturday. That's how bitter cold this incoming air mass will be. It arrives in the northern plains about the Friday night time frame and spreads all the way to the eastern seaboard this weekend. In fact, in the I-95 corridor region from D.C. to Baltimore to Philadelphia, New York City, midday on Saturday, the European model run from last night depicting single-digit temperatures. That may be an over-exaggeration, but the main point is it looks like a very cold weekend. In other words, a very cold storm potentially in the mid-Atlantic region. Also, note how far to the south this very cold air extends all the way down into the south central U.S. from Texas to the Carolinas. You're talking about very cold conditions, and that could set the stage, unfortunately, for a significant icing event. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment or two. But in some areas, it looks like there'll be enough of a layer aloft to cause some freezing rain and sleet, and again, it could potentially end up being a crippling icing event somewhere in that region between Texas and the Carolinas. Now here's a forecast map again from last night's 0Z run of the European model for actual temperatures, this time for midday on Sunday. Still very, very cold conditions across the northern plains, well below zero most areas from Montana across the Dakotas all the way to Wisconsin, and even in the I-95 corridor region, we're talking about potentially the teens or lower on Sunday. And this is the day where it could, in fact, be a snowstorm right here in the Mid-Atlantic region. A very cold storm is in the offing here for the Mid-Atlantic region. We'll talk in a moment about the impact of that on snow ratios. Also, brutally cold all the way down into the heart of Texas. We're talking temperatures near 10 degrees all the way into north central Texas by midday on Sunday. And again, very cold conditions extend all the way from Texas to the Carolinas by the upcoming weekend. Now here's a map from last night's Canadian model run at 0Z of total accumulated freezing rain for this entire weekend event. This goes all the way into the early part of next week, so it includes the entire event here. And this is certainly sending a red flag that there can be a crippling icing event in portions of the southern U.S. here this weekend. This extends all the way from Texas to the Carolinas. We saw a moment or two ago that this bitter cold air mass will drop all the way south into the southern states, and again, it could set the stage for some significant icing during the upcoming weekend, something we'll have to monitor closely here and certainly get prepared for that possibility down across the southern states, again from Texas to the Carolinas. Now here's a forecast map of total liquid equivalent precipitation, really from a blend of models here. It's put together by kind of averaging out a whole bunch of models here. Total liquid equivalent precipitation all the way to about late Sunday night, early Monday. And again, you can see the path here of the highest precipitable water amounts cutting across that area from Texas into the Carolinas. And look up north here. For example, you see 0.7 inches of liquid equivalent precipitation down along near the Philadelphia area, and half an inch up across New York City. Now, normally we talk about a snow ratio of about 10 to 1. In other words, 10 inches of snow for every 1 inch of rain. This particular case, with the possibility of this being a very, very cold storm, those snow ratios will be higher, perhaps 15 or even 20 to 1. In other words, a half an inch of liquid equivalent precipitation could produce 10 inches of snow. So don't be totally deceived by what looks like low precipitable water amounts here. In an Arctic air mass, this can produce some significant snowfall. So it's something to take note that the snow ratios are likely to be quite high for this storm in the Mid-Atlantic region this weekend. Well, before we actually walk through last night's European model run, I just wanted to show this as a total snowfall forecast map, again using the 0Z run of the European model here, and it does not use the conventional 10 to 1 ratio for snow to rain. It uses what the atmosphere tells it to use, and in this particular case, again, I think those snow ratios will be higher, perhaps 15 to 20 to 1 here, and that's why you're seeing some totals here of a foot or more, despite the fact that the liquid equivalent precipitation might be a little bit on the low side here. So again, this is obviously sending a red flag that you have a potential significant snowstorm up across the Mid-Atlantic region. Now, last night's run, one thing it did differently than the prior runs is it turned the storm system up along the northeastern coastline later Sunday night time frame that extends the possibility of significant snow all the way up into, let's say, the southern and eastern part of New England. We'll have to focus in on that over the next few days. But this is what we're potentially dealing with in the Mid-Atlantic region during the upcoming weekend. Now let's go back to more conventional maps here from the European model run of last night. And number one here, we have a bitter cold pattern here, not only this week but next week as well. It will include some extreme cold. We talked about 25 to 30 degrees below zero across the northern plains. And this is a look at the 850 millibar temperature anomalies as we begin the day here on Tuesday, January 20th. A very, very cold air mass right now. The coldest core of this air relative to normal is moving over the Mid-Atlantic region today. And Philadelphia, for example, will struggle to pass 20 degrees. That's some 20 degrees below the normal high for this time of the year. And again, tonight, with the coldest core of the air relative to normal right over the Mid-Atlantic region, you could see some single-digit lows in suburban locations north and west of Baltimore, north and west of Philadelphia, New York City certainly, and maybe even down across far northern and western suburbs of D.C., down into the single digits later on tonight. Now, let's move forward and just take note that we have unrelenting Arctic cold moving across northern plains, Great Lakes, into the Northeast. There will be a one-day reprieve on Thursday in the Mid-Atlantic region. You can kind of see that here at the 850 millibar level. Temperatures could very well climb to 45 to 50 degrees for afternoon highs in D.C., Baltimore, maybe in Philadelphia on Thursday. We'll get some snow melt in those areas north of the Mason-Dixon line where there's some snow cover right now. But look at this. This is a brutal air mass headed into the northern plains later this week. These temperatures here are some, if you look on the scale here, some 20 to 25, perhaps 30 degrees below normal for this time of the year. And this time of the year is the coldest time of the year from a climatological point of view. Statistically speaking, about the third week or so, give or take a few days, maybe the coldest time of the year. So when you're talking 20 to 30 degrees below normal for this time of the year, you're talking some extreme cold. This spreads out to the south and east, and also notice how a piece of it spreads out due south all the way down into Texas. So this is an invasion of Arctic air, basically dropping all the way to the south central states and spreading out all the way to the eastern seaboard by the upcoming weekend, setting the stage for significant snow in some areas and a crippling ice event in other areas. This is now Saturday morning, and just look at the extent of this unbelievable extent here of brutal Arctic air, all the way down to Texas, up across the northern plains, and all the way encompassing the mid-Atlantic region and northeast U.S. Now, let's go beyond this time period to the latter part of the upcoming weekend. Again, just looking at the relentless supply of Arctic air from the north into the U.S. Here we go into the middle part of next week, and then finally the latter part of next week. This is next Thursday, the 29th, yet another Arctic air invasion across the northern plains, the Great Lakes, the Midwest, into the eastern U.S. here later next week. So again, these next couple of weeks here will be brutal indeed across much of the eastern two-thirds of the nation. At the same time, the western U.S. experiences warmer than normal conditions. Well, let's now walk through the surface forecast maps from last night's European model run, and we're still several days away, so things can change, but we'll take a look at how things look right now. And it looks like, again, the bottom line, a lot of bitter cold air and a major weekend winter storm impacting a large part of the nation. It could have an impact for many, many days following, especially in those areas that feature a crippling ice event, unfortunately. So let's go through the maps here, and some very cold conditions here up across the mid-Atlantic, northeast U.S. Again, single digits on the table here for later tonight, early tomorrow, suburbs along the I-95 corridor region. Here is the midweek forecast map here, and you notice kind of a frontal system here, and that is going to cause first a modification in temperatures ahead of that front by Thursday. Again, high temperatures D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, potentially well up in the 40s for that one-day time period. And then and here's that frontal system right in this area right here during the day on Thursday. And you could start to see this brutally cold air mass showing up here by midday, late day on Thursday. It's at this time sliding into the northern plains, and we've talked about these thickness lines here. Notice this thickness here of 480. That is incredibly cold air. That is well below zero air pushing in from south central Canada into the northern plains by late in the day on Thursday, and that is kind of the heart and soul of this next Arctic invasion that dives all the way to the south and pushes all the way to the east by the time we get to the upcoming weekend. And take a look at the Arctic high pressure. Very, very strong. When you see 1054 millibars, you're talking a very strong central pressure, a very strong high pressure system. This is anchoring this brutally cold air mass. Now, by Friday, you start to see some moisture gathering together down across the south central states here in the form of rain initially across Texas, but some pink showing up here. That's the beginning stage of some icing here, and some blue representing the snow here. It kind of explodes in coverage by the time we get to Friday night into Saturday morning. And this time of the year, whenever you see a lot of colors, that is a worrisome signal because it indicates some icing. On this scale right here, you can see sleet and freezing rain, this kind of a color package here. This is snow up here, and all of this moisture starting to spread out to the east and slowly move to the north and east into this very, very cold air mass. Again, looking like a potential very cold storm system for the Mid-Atlantic region with those high snow ratios as a result. And here we go into the latter part of Saturday. Snow extending all the way from eastern New Mexico into the Carolinas, and unfortunately a pretty large band of icing. Some of this will be in the form of sleet and some in the form of freezing rain. Freezing rain is, of course, the most damaging, potentially most damaging of all. So take note of that. This is the area from Texas to the Carolinas where there could be a crippling icing event here. The moisture then starts to expand to the north and east. Now, the European model is a little bit slower on the onslaught of the precipitation into the Mid-Atlantic region, perhaps late Saturday night into Sunday morning. Some of the other models are a little quicker than that. We'll just have to wait and see. Right now, I would say for the Mid-Atlantic region, you're talking about Saturday night through the day on Sunday. And here we go with Arctic high to the north, right here, and to the northwest, anchoring this brutal cold air mass. This is the mid-afternoon, late afternoon forecast map for Sunday. And I've often talked about the almost a requirement for snow in the immediate I-95 corridor region, the big cities. You want that high pressure system to the north. Otherwise, your cold air may retreat rather quickly. Not in this case. Now, we move forward in time, and again, I noted a while ago that the European model takes this low pressure system by Monday and then starts to move it a little bit farther to the north here. Notice it jumps up to the north. That extends the possibility of a snowstorm all the way into the southern and eastern parts of New England, the northeast U.S. This particular model run has it still snowing all the way well into the day on Monday in the D.C., New York City corridor, and at this particular time all the way up to Boston. This, of course, would be a major impacting storm, and this is all the way now into Tuesday morning, something we'll have to monitor closely over the next few days. But again, the bottom line here, a bitter cold pattern over the next couple of weeks. It will include some extreme cold, with some areas getting all the way down to 25 or 30 degrees below zero. We also look quite likely that we'll have to deal with a major weekend winter storm that'll have big impact all the way from the south central states to the east coast. You're talking about the possibility of a crippling icing event, Texas to the Carolinas, in a certain band down from Texas to the Carolinas, and of course a substantial snow event farther to the north and east, and that certainly can include the Mid-Atlantic region. So stay tuned to arcfieldweather.com for updates later today and over the next few days. That's it for now. I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.